How's it going, everyone? Welcome back. So 2020, it's over. Season's over. We are 20 years into this century. And we're going to take a look back and play a little game of all-time Bengals of the past 20 years. Starting off at quarterback, we got to go Carson Palmer. I look what this guy did for this team. He brought this team to a whole different level year in and year out. He turned this team into a competitor. Love what Andy Dalton did. You want to play the playoff success? Sure, he did have that. I mean, it was getting him before Carson Palmer. But you talk about a guy that came to this franchise and just turned things around real quickly. And he really gave you that sense of, hey, we can win any single game, any given day. Throughout his tenure here with Cincinnati. Now, unfortunately, we all know how things ended with Carson Palmer. At least the Bengals got something good in return with Carson Palmer. But we also seen how well he did perform once he left Cincinnati. This guy is a bona fide stud of a quarterback. Going to the running back position, Corey Dillon. All right, tough one. We're going Corey Dillon now. Say what you will about his, again, it's amazing how often we hear this one, his departure from the Queen City. But this man railed off 6 consecutive 1,100 plus rushing yard seasons to start his career in Cincinnati. And from 2000 to 2004, saw 3 seasons over 1,300 rush yards and averaged a combined 4.2 yards per carry during that time. He, to put it bluntly, was the offense. The 4-time Pro Bowler earned his way onto this list. We're going to the offensive line. Starting at the left side, we have a left tackle, Andrew Whitworth. I mean, does this one need an explanation? The man the Bengals would let go in his mid-30s, saying he's too old, he can't continue to play at a high level, not for that pay. A man who would then go to the LA Rams and be named an All-Pro at the age of 36. In a league where it's beyond important to protect the quarterback's blind side, Andrew was one of the best to do it in the league, let alone just for the Bengals. And he was a true class act when it came to being a teammate for these young guys as well throughout his tenure in Cincinnati. His 10-year tenure, by the way, nothing but love for Big Wick. Going to left guard, the interior gets a little bit more difficult. We're going to see Kevin Zeitler. A man who I think went under the radar in Cincinnati for quite a few years, that we may have taken for granted a bit, if you will, but was an excellent guard. In 5 years with the Bengals, he'd only allowed 9 quarterback sacks, and 7 of those came in just the first 2 seasons. Coming down the middle at center, we got Rich Bram. Some call him the man that set the bar and the standard for Cincinnati centers for years to come. A man who found himself on the outs fighting his way in all the way up until he got to make some starts in Cincinnati. But it was all but history from there, as Bram would be a major piece of this Bengals offensive line that powered Corey Dillon, that powered Rudy Johnson to monster years on the ground, as well as keeping that quarterback upright throughout his tenure with the Bengals. Over to right guard, we got Bobby Williams. An interesting way to get to where he did, as he wouldn't become a starter until age 27. And he would go on to start 1 year in Philly before heading to Cincinnati for the next 8 seasons, where he would start and play a pivotal role, and again in keeping quarterback Carson Palmer up. And again, we bring it up, leaving those holes, those gaps for the Rudy Johnsons, the Cedric Bensons of the world, giving them run lanes. An excellent job he did for the Bengals throughout his career. Going to right tackle, probably could have guessed it, Big Willie Anderson, a man that could seal the right side and was a big piece again in developing quarterback Carson Palmer, keeping him upright 4 consecutive Pro Bowls and being a 3-time All-Pro during that span. Willie would spend all but 1 year of his career with the Cincinnati Bengals, that being where he finished in Baltimore in 2008. Big Willie's got to be on the list. Coming in at wide receiver, these are some slam dunks. Chad Johnson, the man that made football fun. I don't know how else to put it. One of the most entertaining players to lace him up in NFL history, and he did so in elite fashion. Some will say that he's got some of the best feet they've seen out of any wide receiver in the history of the NFL. Prime Chad, no one could cover him. Who can cover 85? Who could forget it? Chad Johnson making the list. AJ Green. To go from Chad to AJ, and now T. Higgins. Yeah, you heard that right. Now T. Higgins. The Bengals have been blessed with some excellent wide receivers. Green looked to be on pace for a historical Hall of Fame pace, coming out with 5 1,000-yard receiving seasons in his first 6 years. And wasn't for injuries, he would have easily had that other 1,000 yard receiving in those first 6 years. Injuries, though, which really derailed AJ's career and derailed it pretty quickly after those first 6 seasons, unfortunately. AJ's services, though, his contributions to this team, they'll never be forgotten, never be taken for granted. Loving AJ Green. Going to tight end. Now, this is a tough one, but we're going to say Jermaine Gresham. No one will ever forget the 13 touchdown dominant performance Tyler Eifert put up for the Bengals, but injuries derailed that guy's career in so many different ways. Lack of any sort of consistency due to that. But Gresham, on the other hand, man, this guy put up 5 straight seasons, 450 plus receiving yards for the Bengals, and he'd go on to head to Arizona to reunite with an old friend afterwards there. Heading to the defensive line, we got edge rusher Carlos Dunlap. Now, it's unfortunate to see things unfold the way they did with Carlos in Cincinnati, who, by the way, after all of what happened last season, all the drama, the debacle, and finally getting traded, well, Johnathan finished 2020 really strong. This man ended up with 6 sacks. Did he have one or none? One or none with the Bengals before going to Seattle, and he just woke up. So maybe that change of scenery was big for him. Because this was a man going into 2020 that had 7 consecutive seasons of 7.5 sacks or more per year. And he was a real force on this Bengals defensive line on the outside the past decade. Speaking of real force on the defensive line, you got Big Geno. Geno Atkins, an absolute monster up the middle and near unstoppable force that could just bull rush any and everybody on that offensive line, and he could change games because of it. An 8-time Pro Bowler, 2-time All-Pro, and the man even made the NFL's All-2010s team, accumulating an impeccable 75.5 sacks, 100 TFLs, and 171 quarterback hits in that decade. Excellent, excellent addition to that Bengals defense, no questions about it. Going to nose tackle, we have Domata Peko. I don't know if there's a more symbolic player on the Bengals defense in the past 2 decades than Domata, and that big-bodied, long flowing hair clogging up the middle of the trenches and doing an excellent job at stuffing the run. His specialty, run stopping. In 11 seasons with the Bengals, Peko would accumulate 39 tackle for losses, 46 QB hits, 18.5 sacks. Going to the other edge, we are going to say Michael Johnson, a man who is part of, again, a Bengals elite defensive pass rush there in the early 2010s. Again, we've talked about this before. It makes it so great when you have that ability to swap in 4 guys for 4 guys. He was a big part of that defensive line unit that would go out there and make life easier for the rest of this defense and harder for opposing teams' quarterbacks. I think he deserves a spot on the list. Going to linebacker, we're going to say Brian Simmons. Simmons, who spent all but 1 year of his career with the Cincinnati Bengals, recording 52 tackle for losses, 23 sacks, 8 fumble recoveries, and 39 passes defended, was a backer that could fly all over the place for these Bengals, and he did an excellent job with it. Going to our other linebacker, we're going to say it, Vontaze Burfict, baby. Oh, the controversy behind the name, but forget about that. We got to forget about that. He's the only Bengals backer to be named to a Pro Bowl in the past 20 years. And, man, his play style, to say the very least, was the reason that downfall happened so quickly for him. But this was a man that went out there and just played with another type of intensity. That was his play style. If you didn't understand the guy, you didn't understand the background, you didn't understand how much the way he played, you looked at him as a dirty player. That is just the way this man played. I mean, there was some dirty plays in there as well, but, at the end of the day, the best thing Burfict could have done was play differently. That leading with the helmet all the time, I think that led up year after year after year. It built up quickly. The injuries, the concussions, where he just couldn't maintain that high level of play. But when he did, this man was a difference maker for this Bengals defense. There was no question about it. When you have a stud on defense, especially at that linebacker position, when you notice, you can feel the intensity. The change of pace of the game is just completely changed when you have a guy like Vontaze Burfict on the field, opposed to when he wasn't on the field. This guy was a force to be reckoned with. Even if it was for a short period of time, you got to make him out on this list. We're going to go on the other linebacker, our third one. We're going to say Rey Maualuga. Maualuga has always felt like the hot topic, honestly, when it came to the Bengals, on whether or not they should move on from him over the years. But, from a pure run-stopping standpoint, Rey was an exceptional backer for this Bengals team. Moving over to safety, Reggie Nelson. Reggie, the safety blanket of this Bengals defense during the early 2010s. That was a part of what was one of the more, again, dominant stretches we've seen out of a Bengals defense in franchise history. Nelson, a two-time Pro Bowler, a lock to make this list. Our other safety, we're going to say Jessie Bates. I know, he's still young, but we got to include him. It's been 3 seasons. This man should have been a first-team All-Pro in 2020, but not a popular team. We all know how that works over here. Ken Riley. Excuse me there. But we know how that works when you're not a big market team. Sometimes you don't get the notoriety, and that's the best way I can put it, because this man is an absolute freaking stud. He's an elite player. He's an elite talent, and he's going to be for years to come. Bengals got to make sure they got this guy locked down for as long as possible, because he's got some promise here. Going to cornerback, we're going to say this is tough. This one's tough. We can go 2 different directions here. We're going to say Johnathan Joeseph, first of all. 2-time Pro Bowler, 4 years with the Bengals. Excellent cover player. And I think he's still in the league. Just now starting to fall off a lot, though. He was with the Titans last year, I think, right? But his age is catching up to him. But when he was with the Bengals and he had some years in Houston, he was an excellent cover corner. Then you have, yes, I think we're going to go this direction. Look at Torrey James. We're going to go Leon Hall. Leon Hall, shockingly, never seen a Pro Bowl, but I think he has to make this team. As a man that was with this team for 9 years, who really had to take this defense by the reins when Joseph left, first of all, and he did that, and he played exceptionally well, was just a quiet guy. You didn't hear much about the guy. He just did his job. We've seen him move to cover the slot more frequently later in his career. When, he's seen Pac-Man come, he's seen Terrence come, he moved out wide, whatever. When those guys went out wide to cover the slot, he did an exceptional job there. He's just a guy that did his job as needed. Moving over to the punter. I mean, it's a pretty short list here. There are a couple players on this list. Kevin Huber's breaking franchise records here for the Bengals. We're going to put him on there, of course. At kicker, Shayne Graham. It's crazy the way kickers work. Shayne Graham was, at one point in time in his career, the most accurate kicker in the NFL. And then you started seeing the fumbled snaps, the couple botched, the botched snaps, the botched holds, the missed kicks. And things just unraveled really quickly with Shayne Graham and company. This guy had so much promise, and it's just that's what happens with kickers, though. You get that little hiccup in there, and they lose the confidence, and they lose their swagger a little bit, and things just unravel. But this man, you got to appreciate what he did for this Bengals team for some years there. We're going to throw a kick returner in there because you got to, right? We got to find a way to get Adam Pac-Man Jones involved into this list. Now, Pac-Man, I think it's pretty, I want to say unanimous that he was never used enough, period. As a punt returner for this team, it was always Alex Erickson. Who was before Alex Erickson? Gosh dang, I can't even think of the name now. It's not Erickson. Brandon Tate. They brought these guys in there who just, nobody had that sort of head fake, that sort of move, that sort of the juking ability, the way to just move defenses with his eyes, return teams with his eyes to create spaces. He was one of the most feared punt returners in the league, and the Bengals would bring him out for the most part because, at the same time, this was guys putting up Pro Bowl caliber years for him out his corner, so they was trying to be a little bit more cautious with him. But when they needed that big punt return, you put Pac-Man back there. You hope he got his hands on that football because he was a difference maker in games. Pac-Man Jones, one of the best to do it for the Bengals in that punt return, kick return game, making a list. That's our thoughts. We'd love to hear your guys' who we missed, who we could have added in there. Thank you guys for watching. We'll see you next time.